guys, it's Sam with two M's, and welcome to another MYXclusive interview. Happy Wednesday to everyone in the Philippines. But as you guys can see, I have a guest here with me. I'm very, very excited to have him here. He's a singer, songwriter, and worship leader who has won multiple awards, has had multiple Grammy nominations, and has even performed in front of millions for World Youth Day back in 2013. And he's calling us all the way from Nashville, Tennessee for his first ever Philippine interview, guys. Everyone, please welcome Maher.
Good
Woo!
morning.
Good morning, Matt. But it's like good. It's like nighttime over there.
It's
So
good, it's good
should I
evening
say?
for me. It's good morning for
Yeah,
you.
good evening. Yeah. So, guys, to everyone watching, so Matt is actually in the past. I'm in the future because of all
That's
of the time difference. But we're so glad to have you here, Matt. How have you been?
I've been good.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of like everyone, you wake up each morning and just kind of pray for the grace to embrace the day and whatever
Mm-hmm.
comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
But we're good. My wife and I've been homeschooling two of our
Wow.
three kids.
Mm-hmm.
So and thank goodness I kind of have a studio behind my house, so
Mm-hmm.
been writing a lot of music,
Yeah.
taking advantage of the time.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Oh, that's really cool that you've been up to a lot of stuff, like homeschooling your children. I feel like is a feat in itself. That's amazing. So how has that been for you? Like, were they always homeschooled, or was this because of like the pandemic?
No, because of the pandemic. So it was
Mm-hmm.
about a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right now,
Mm-hmm.
for most people, I was on a tour. We did a weekend, and then and then spring break sort of came, and everyone was
Mm-hmm.
home, and then the whole world was kind of locked down.
Yeah.
And we our kids went to distance learning like everyone, so everyone was kind of glued to a laptop.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided kind of at the end of the summer last year, you know what, we're home, I'm not touring. We were like, let's try out the homeschooling thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
we tried it for a year, and I think we didn't mess up our kids, but we're looking forward.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're looking forward to going back to school in the fall too, just
Mm-hmm.
to kind of be around more friends.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that
Yeah.
though, because I can imagine it could have been difficult at first because of course, like online schooling, distance learning. So
Yeah.
it's really great of you guys to think of actually helping them with homeschool, which I feel like if I were a parent, that would be such a huge thing to do. But props to you guys for being able to do it. But you also
Well,
mentioned that you've been yeah, go ahead.
oh
Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, my wife's very patient, so I leaned on her a lot for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it takes a lot of patience to homeschool your kids. So how
Yeah.
old are your kids, if you don't mind me asking?
They're 5, 7, and 9.
Oh my God, so they're still
Yeah.
like really tiny. Not tiny,
Yeah,
but
they're
they're
very
still
little.
young.
Yeah, still very young.
Yeah, so
So
hang in there, Matt. You got this. We
thank
believe in you
you.
guys.
Thank you.
You got this. But you also mentioned that you've been writing a lot too during this time. And I can imagine with everything that was going on in the past year, a lot of crazy things aside from the pandemic, of course. There were a lot of things also going on your side of the world. So how is it kind of navigating through all of this and still kind of finding inspiration? Because I've like personally for me, sometimes it's difficult when so many things are going on. It's hard to find inspiration for creative stuff. But for you, how is it kind of dealing with all of that?
Well, I think if anything, the past year has been a reminder that if anything, if there's anything that I learned, it's that in terms of
Mm-hmm.
creativity, you have to be willing to sit with things. We
Mm-hmm.
live in a kind of a world where, because of this device, I can say whatever I think or feel pretty much immediately. And I think, but when you create music and art, sometimes you have to kind of let stuff sit inside you for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of let it stew up a little bit and
Mm-hmm.
let it come out in your music. And so I think with all the different stuff that's happened throughout the year, that's what I've tried to do, is not necessarily go to social media always to say what it is I'm thinking or feeling, but
Mm-hmm.
because God gave me this gift of music, it's sort of saying, all right, Lord, I'm gonna sit with this with you, and help me figure out how to say it, um,
Mm-hmm.
and say it in the most compelling way. Because I think sometimes, um, we can get easily distracted, or our emotions can get the better of us, and then we end up saying or doing things that we weren't really even trying to say or do in the first place.
Yeah.
And so I think that for me, it's been a really good time to kind of remember that, to go back and to kind of go back to, in some ways, you go back to your first loves, going back to just that initial thing that I loved about making music. And does it make you feel something? Does it feel believable? If thank goodness my wife's like one of my best critics. So
Yeah.
she hears everything before the
Yeah.
world does. So I think that's definitely been that. And I think the cool thing too is that because artists have been home, um, I I've written with so many people all across the world, because we're home. We've all been
Yeah.
home. So
Sure.
um, that's been kind of a cool thing that I think I didn't anticipate, was the amount of collaboration that could happen.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Like what you said, social media, it's so easily accessible that we could like in an instant share whatever we're thinking. But to be able to sit with your thoughts and everything with your feeling, I feel like is a very difficult thing, but very necessary too for everyone to experience. So now I'm curious, Matt, like within the last year, what do you think was the hardest thing you had to come to grips with in terms of like everything you experienced, especially the stuff that you had to make yourself feel or think about during this time?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it would be that, uh, it's this past year was 25 years that I'd been kind of taking my faith seriously.
Hmm.
And you would think that after 25 years, there'd be certain things that you used to kind of struggle with that you don't struggle with anymore, like insecurity
Yeah.
or anxiety, or, struggling with your ego
Hmm.
or your emotions. And I think the pandemic, kind of in some ways was like a big light, like a big light bulb shining on my soul, and kind of reminding me of how human I was and how frail I was. And so I think a lot of things that I've had to struggle with have been a lot of stuff just inside, stuff in my heart, stuff in my head. I think because I'm an artist, I have a tendency to overthink things. I get stuck in my head sometimes. And so I think in some ways, being home and going, I have a family, I have kids. Um, this is a crazy thing that nobody wanted to have happen, but there there could be a silver lining in it. There could be an opportunity to make the most of it. And this is the most amount of time I've been around my family in 10 years. So all of the stuff that happened didn't need to happen for that to happen.
Yeah.
But that's not how, I don't think that's how God works. But I do think that there is an opportunity, to kind of redeem any season that we find ourselves in, any situation that we find ourselves in. There's always a redemptive angle to it. So I think for me, yeah, a lot of the stuff has been kind of more just kind of kind of like a checkup in a way, like a spiritual or a soul checkup, emotional checkup, and yeah, and kind of glad that 2021 is here for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like that's all of us too. Everything you just described, that was all of us when we felt like, oh, we started questioning, like, or we started remembering that, yeah, like what you said, we are human, we're finite, like things aren't forever. And there's so many things that we forget and take advantage of when this whole pandemic wasn't going on. But you said that this is already like 25 years into you taking your faith seriously, and you just spreading that kind of you're spreading that kind of purpose that you have with everyone. So I also do want to ask, Matt, when did you realize that creating music was something you wanted to share with the world?
I think it's pretty much my whole life. I mean, I went to kind of parochial school growing up. I grew up in Newfoundland, Canada, and so I went to a Catholic school, and so we would go to church once a week. And I remember this feeling of like singing in church with my friend in the third grade, and our voices were like harmonizing, and I remembered how nice that sounded, and that's like probably my earliest memory of kind of making music and thinking, wow, this is something I love doing. And I think when I was in high school was, when I was a teenager was really when I wasn't good at anything else. So that it was the thing that I loved doing, and it was the thing that I had an inclination towards. And so I think I just gravitated to it. And so I kind of knew my whole life, I'm going to do something with music. But it was really 25 years ago when I moved to Arizona. My parents got divorced, and I started going back to church. And that was when I sort of had this like kind of awakening to, oh, wow, God's real. This is all like, this feels very real. And I needed, this needs to be more of a compass in my life. And then I started exploring the idea, just asking the question of like, well, what would it look like if my faith informed the music that I made? And it was crazy because I didn't sing. I wasn't a singer. I played keyboards in a rock band in high school.
Wow.
But I was like the guy in the back. I wasn't the guy up front singing. And I really found my voice singing at church. Just week after week, kind of volunteering and helping out. And then I got a part-time job playing at church. And then I graduated from college with a music degree. I was 25, and I just said, I'll try it for a year. And I fell in love with it and didn't really look back. And I didn't even think that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. Like if someone had told me, oh, 15 years later, you're going to sing for 3 million people, I would have laughed at them. Because I never looked at myself that way. And so it's been a pretty amazing ride.
Sure. I feel like that's crazy how the universe works. Like at first you didn't really think that, you were going to be like the person singing in front of like millions of people, but it just ended up that way. And the universe just works in really mysterious ways. But it's crazy because it brought you here, and now we're talking about it, which I feel like is such a crazy moment too. But I'm also really curious because from my experience with faith, I realize, one also grows through faith. Like with your faith, you grow along with it, and your faith evolves throughout the years. So in what ways has this reflected in your music, do you think?
I think it's funny. I think the more I grow in my faith, the less certain I feel about me. And in the sense of like, I think the more I grow in my faith, the more I realize my own inconsistency as a person. But I think you grow in your capacity to not hate yourself because of it. Because I think that's the thing for me, is that my ability to grow as a person has really been proportional to my encounter with mercy, with the mercy of God. So it's me coming to terms of being honest with where I fall short, and then also realizing that I'm loved, and I'm loved by a love that, like, we're all loved because we're all made in the image of love. So we're made in the image and likeness of I believe, a God who's love. And so the more you grow in that awareness, the more you realize how much that love, it sort of completes what you can't. And it gives you a capacity to love others in a way that you can't figure out how to do on your own, because we're just limited. And I think being a parent has been a massive eye opener to that. There's so many times with my kids where, I tell them, I'm like, there's nothing that you could ever do that would ever change the way I feel about you. Like, I'm your dad, and I love you, and I'm finite. I'm not infinite. I'm not eternal. And so when I think about how much I love my kids, and then I realize, oh, I'm loved that much, but actually to infinity, by God, is just sort of, it's overwhelming. But I think it in a good way, it humbles you, but I don't think it like humbles you to the point of like beating you up. I think it just helps reorient you in the universe, and hopefully make you more grateful. So.
Yeah, I feel like that's exactly like I remember learning about that too when I was taking like a theology class about like how God is love. And that was also like an awakening moment for me. And I was just like, oh my God, like this, like why it kind of like what you said, kind of reoriented the way that I dealt with people and the experiences that I had in my life. So it's crazy that, you know, you're also able to see that and share it with others through your music. And speaking of sharing your music with others, like what we mentioned, you've performed in front of millions of people, including at the Vigil Mass at World Youth Day in 2013, sorry, in Brazil. So what was that experience like, being able to do that and share music with so many people all across the globe in one place?
Yeah, I mean, it's surreal. It doesn't. Your eyes literally can't. You can't. It's like you can't process all the information that you're seeing.
Mhm.
So it it's it was on Copacabana Beach, which is,
Mhm.
you know, kind of a very famous beach in Rio, and it was basically, someone said the whole beach stretched about 2 miles,
Mhm.
and it was just covered with people for 2 miles.
Wow, that's
Um,
crazy.
and so your eyes just can't process it, you know.
Mhm.
And it in in the moment, it actually felt very small. It didn't
Mhm.
feel
Wow.
like I was at this big, massive event. Like when
Mhm.
I was singing this song called "Lord, I Need You," and
Mhm.
it actually, for me, it was like this very insular, intimate moment.
Mhm.
And when I was singing the song, I actually kept thinking about, um, when I lived in Phoenix. I used to work at a church, and I used to play on Monday nights for, like a little scripture study, and I'd
Mhm.
sing. And I kept thinking about that. And there'd be like 15 or 20 kids, like high school kids at this. And I just kept thinking about that. And I was like, why am I thinking
Wow.
about this?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it was this thing where, like, I felt like God was saying to me, I was just as much present in the room with you and 15 kids as I am
Mhm.
right now with you on a beach and 2 million people.
Wow.
Like, I don't want,
Mhm.
like, in some ways, I felt like what God was trying to teach me in that moment was that we think about the big event with 2 million people, but
Mhm.
he's just as much in the small events.
Yeah. Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like, one person watching this right now, he is just as present to
Mhm.
them in that moment, in this
Mhm.
moment, as he was to this endless throng of people.
Yeah.
Um, but it was very overwhelming after the
Mhm.
fact. Like when I got done with it,
Mhm.
you know, I think so much because you train a lot as a musician, and
Yeah.
you know, there's a whole kind of school of performance, and you can kind of get through it technically.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think once I got through it, I remember kind of walking back to my hotel, and I was just like crying because it was just sort of like my body just had to, like, there's all these emotions I was trying to process,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
And I just remember just being so grateful, uh,
Mhm.
for like the opportunity, and kind of feeling like I I don't know why I got to be part of this, but you
Mhm.
know, it's like all think there's sometimes things happen when we don't understand, and you just, you know, you just pray for a heart of gratitude.
Mhm. For sure. And I feel like that's such a powerful way of thinking about it. Like God is still present even in the small events, in the same way that he is in the big events, which I think is something that we should always remind ourselves to, especially for those, you know, who like me, I get so anxious too. So I feel like that's something that would help me too when I'm dealing with a lot of stuff. But obviously, like Matt, I'm sure being able to share your music with others is such an amazing thing. That's why I do want to talk about your newest singles or your newest songs that you've put out. I do want to talk about Christ is Risen. So could you tell us more about like what inspired this song?
Yeah, it's actually, you know, we kind of re-released
Mhm.
a version of this song. It's been
Mhm.
around for about 10 years, but
Mhm.
just kind of in time for Easter.
Mhm.
Uh, this song is really special to me because it's actually based on one of the things I love doing in my songwriting, particularly
Mhm.
with like music that people sing at church, is I love trying to reincorporate older prayers or ideas
Mhm.
that have kind of been around, because I feel like that's kind of part of how we grow in our faith, is by learning the things that have been said before us. And
Mhm.
so this song is actually based on a sermon from the 3rd century. And it's a sermon. It was written by a guy named St. John Chrysostom. And every year in the Orthodox Church, they at Easter, they sing this chant saying, "Christ is risen from the dead, trampling over death by death, redeeming us from the grave." And so, and it comes from this sermon. And basically what the sermon talks about is how basically God used death to destroy death. So it sort of celebrates kind of the end of death, really. You know, that's sort of at the fundamental core of Christian belief, is that you know, death doesn't have a sting, as Paul says in Scripture. So so it felt like it was cool, like sort of on the 10-year anniversary that people kind of first heard the song, kind of re-record it. And it's been honestly one of my favorite songs to sing live, because it just, I feel connected to the past in a really in a powerful way.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful thing with music. Like music is able, when you first come out with something, it like marks a certain period in your life. Then when you listen to it down the line, it's like, oh, you're kind of like taken back to that time when you first released it. So it's been 10 years. So what did you kind of do different for this one? Was there anything new that you tried for this re-release or this reimagination of your Christ is Risen?
Yeah, it's a lot simpler, but I got to record it with actually the female songwriter and worship leader that I wrote the song with. Her name is Fields, and we had never done a recording of the song together. So that was really special to get to do it, and we filmed it. It's on my YouTube page. So so that I think kind of marked it in a good way.
Yeah, I think to mark the 10 years and being able to do that with Mia, I feel like is the best way that you can really share it again with everyone else. But I also do want to talk to another song that you, I think, released last year, Run to the Father. So could you tell us more about what inspired this one and what it's about?
Yeah, so this song, Run to the Father, is it's part of a project that came out about a year ago called Alive and Breathing. And I've kind of marked seasons of my life by making records in a way. They kind of represent chapters. And this album was sort of like a hybrid live studio album. And so it was kind of like recapping songs that I'd co-written with different artists or worship leaders, because that's kind of been a big part of, that was part of why I moved to Nashville. I've always felt a call to unity in the church, and singing is a way in which we kind of make unity visible, because when you're singing with someone, you can't yell at them.
That's so true.
Yeah. So Run to the Father was part of it. And it was a song that was written 2 years ago. It was actually, I wrote it around the same time that I wrote the title track, Alive and Breathing. But this song was written with another worship leader artist named Cody Carnes and a guy named Ryan Jackson. And we had gotten together, and Cody had talked about wanting to write a song about kind of the sort of that revelation of God as a father, you know, like I was talking about earlier. And so the song really just came out of this writing with him, and the story of the prodigal son, and I think was definitely something that we pulled from. You know, in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus tells this parable about a son who basically says to his dad, "I need you to basically die or act like you're dead so you can give me my inheritance." Goes off and squanders it, and then comes back. And the interesting thing about it is that, and the bridge of this song kind of talks about it, is that parable isn't just really about the son saying, "Oh no, I made a mistake. I need to say I'm sorry and come back." The parable kind of gets upended, because Jesus talks about how when his father sees the son far off, he runs out to meet him and culturally, that was a very dishonoring thing for a father, for a man to do, because it would have meant he would have had to lift up his tunic. So Jesus kind of breaks this whole concept of honor and shame using this story of a father who's willing to run out. And so this song, I think the verses kind of talk about this notion of like, there's stuff that we carry that we can't deal with ourselves. There are problems that we face that just feel too overwhelming. And so it says this thing of like, I run to the Father again and again and again. But then the bridge basically acknowledges this thing of like, my heart has been in your sights long before my first breath. And so the reality of running to God isn't so much about us doing all this work of trying to earn our way back into his good graces, as much as it is as sort of this awakening or this realization of God as a father who's already run out to us. So it was kind of a song that when we wrote it, we really wrote it kind of for Cody, but the more I sang it on my own, the more I really identified with it. And I think especially in this past year, so I kind of said to Cody, he was going to record it. I said, hey, are you okay if I record it too? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And so for me, it really, really hit, I think, especially as a dad, that, like I say to my kids, there's nothing you could ever do that would change the way I feel about you. And so to have that, and then to have a song like this, to be singing really over myself during this whole kind of pandemic, it's been a reminder in some ways for me personally. I feel like, that my songs are prayers that I need to pray. They're things that I need to sing. And if someone else resonates with it, that's unbelievable. But it's usually just stuff that I really need to say.
Oh, I love that you share that with us. I never really thought about how for artists, you always think about how they create music for their audience and for whoever's listening, but in many ways it also helps them go through whatever they're going through. And I do have a question, Matt, since you are someone who writes about faith, and for example, for this song, it was about like the whole prodigal son story, which is a story that I've been hearing for I like as long as I've known by faith, it's been a really long time I've heard about the prodigal son story. I always wonder, like, how are you able to kind of translate that kind of story and what it means to you into music, and kind of like how you share that with others? Because I feel like with stories like the prodigal son, everyone kind of interprets them differently or understands it differently. But how is that for you, kind of taking that story that a lot of people know and making it music?
Well, I think the first thing is when we think about the Bible, we tend to think of it as just a book and not as history. So I think the first thing you have to know is that these are stories, but they're told in a historical context. And it's important to know, to do a bit of background and learn the history and learn the culture. So I think learning about the culture in which Jesus lived, and so why did he say the things that he said, and why was it revolutionary or controversial or whatever, I think that stuff kind of sometimes helps create like a three-dimensional image. It's kind of like when you're in school and you're a kid and you had to make like a diorama where you would like read a story and then you have to make like a three-dimensional thing of it.
Yes.
I feel like learning some of that stuff, that's like part of it. And then the next part would be I think you practice this thing using your imagination. The fancy term for it is called Lectio Divina, but it's put yourself in the story. Like, who are you? We hear a story like that, we automatically think of ourselves as someone. It's just part of what we do. It's like when we're kids, someone tells us a story. If it's a fairy tale, we start, thinking of like, okay, who am I in this story? Like, who do I identify with? And I think part of the thing with it is you kind of gotta go back a couple of times and go, what does it mean to identify with the prodigal son? What does it mean to identify with the father? There's an older brother in the story too. He gets resentful because the younger brother's kind of squandered everything and he should get punished. And he comes back and he gets the fatted calf and he gets a ring on his finger and he gets a fancy coat. And do we feel that way sometimes when we see people who we go, this person doesn't deserve anything. And yet it just feels like everything goes well their way. And so I think I think I do a lot of stuff like that personally.
Yeah.
And then
Mhm.
when it comes down to making music, I don't try to take that and literally turn it into a song. You have
Mhm.
you have to filter it through your life. You have to filter it through your heart. Um,
Mhm.
and I always tell people like songwriting, there's like practical work and then there's imaginative work. And so like the practical work
Yeah.
is like practice your instrument, learn more words in
Mhm.
language,
Mhm.
read other song lyrics, memorize other people's melodies. Like, kind of there's so many great tools online now that you can use for that. But then the last piece that's like the most important part is you.
Mhm.
There's only one you. You're original. Every
Mhm.
single one of us. And so how do you be original? How do you just like even in your music, like don't try to copy everyone else. Just be you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um and it and that's hard because sometimes that's the thing that we're afraid of being the most. It's just being ourselves.
Yes. Oh my God. I feel like you just talked to my soul. That's exactly how I feel sometimes. Like, you know how they say being like just be yourself, but like that's really one of the hardest things to do ever because there's so many things that we think about, what people are gonna think of us and all of that. But well, like what you said, Matt, it's really crazy that you're able to share yourself with others through your music and in that process also help others kind of do the same for themselves. So we're so excited for also everything that you've been working on. You mentioned a while ago that you've been working on a lot of music. So what else can we expect from you coming this year in 2021? Like you said, you're very excited that it's
Yeah.
2021. So what can we expect from you coming this year?
They're coming out soon. There's a
Mhm.
version of a song that I got to produce with an artist named Corinne Hawthorne
Mhm.
called
Mhm.
How Great, and that'll be coming out very soon. I hope I was allowed to say that. A couple of other songs I've kind of
Mhm.
co-written or produced, some other
Mhm.
projects that I've been working on, and then I'll
Mhm.
hopefully knock on wood, but I'll have new music out later this year.
Mhm. I love that you knocked on wood. But we're gonna manifest it.
Well,
It's gonna
I was
happen.
gonna do this too, but
We're gonna manifest Matt's new music for this year in 2021. But before I do let you go, Matt, do you have a message to everyone who's been listening to you, everyone who is a fan of your music, especially in the Philippines?
I think I would say three words that are the most used words in the Bible, which is
Mhm.
don't be afraid. I think more than ever before, our world is gripped with a lot of fear and anxiety. And if you have faith, um, I think have the faith to go out into the world and tell people don't be afraid.
Mhm.
You know,
Wow.
if God is God, he's got to be big enough to handle all that we're facing right now. And
Mhm.
so, for I just feel like people who follow Jesus and follow the way of love need to be a voice and an agent of stability more than ever
Mhm.
before in the world. It doesn't mean that bad things aren't going to happen, or it doesn't mean that things aren't going to be continue to be crazy in some ways. But I think there is a peace that surpasses all understanding, and I think we're
There
supposed to
is.
be the ones who carry that everywhere we go.
Mhm. Mhm. And I love that. Thank you for that. I mean, I felt like that I also needed a reminder like that, like not to be afraid, because it's
I
so
do
easy.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's so easy to be afraid. Fear is like the automatic that we all feel, but being able to get kind of past that, not really past, but kind of own it and really just kind of be stable, like what you said, is something that is very special and something that we all need during this time. But thank you so much, Matt, for joining me today for your first ever Philippine interview. Crazy, but thank you for joining us today, Matt. It was so fun getting to talk to you.
You as well, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, thank you. And thank you to everyone too who tuned into this MYXclusive interview with Matt Maher. Make sure to stream all of his music. It's available on multiple digital streaming platforms, so make sure to check that out. But once again, everyone, Matt Maher. Woo! Thank you, everyone. This has been Sam with 2Ms. We will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye bye.